Is this a great game or what on Tuesday, December 10th? And it is a very important day because we are releasing our compilation episode of 2024, our highlight moments from every single interview we did in 2024. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to the Juan Soto signing, which is massive. And we're going to talk about the two new Hall of Famers that we're going to get in 2025. But most importantly, today is December 10th. Which means it's my dad's birthday. Happy birthday, Papa!
Well, thank you, Jeff. Share this birthday with Carlos Rodon of the Yankees, Nestor Cortez of the Yankees, Joe Burrow of the Bengals, and a bunch of others. But today is my 68th birthday, and I understand you have a present for me. Is that right?
I did. I sent it to your house. Did you get it? Do you have it in front of you?
Yeah, I do, and I don't know what's in here.
I hope you like it. Here we go. He's ruffling. It's a birthday for Tim Kurkjian.
Oh, my gosh. It's a Washington Commanders jersey. How about that?
Wow. Yeah, it's a sweatshirt, right? A hoodie?
Yeah, it's a hoodie. That looks great, Jeff.
They're playing really good this year.
Yeah,
I thought you would get in the spirit.
It's really great, and I'm thrilled. Thank you very much, Jeff, because as you know, a couple years ago for my birthday, I got a hand vacuum, I got a broom, I got a device to shave my nose hair, and you bought me a device to shave my back hair. That was my birthday. I mean, it kind of had a common theme to it, doesn't it?
It was all about cleanliness that year, for sure.
Right. And after
that was the best birthday you've ever had.
Right. So all the stuff that falls off of my body, I had a broom to sweep it up with. So that was great. And thank you so much for the gift, Jeff. That's really great.
Of course. Well, for people who don't know, my dad grew up in Bethesda, Maryland. I grew up not too far away in Darnestown, Maryland. So you grew up quite a tortured fan of this organization at times. I know I did. And every time they'd win like 2 games in a row, what would we say?
We're going to the soup. Yeah, that's right.
We're going to the soup.
Right.
And then if they threw an interception in the third quarter, what would you say? We stink.
Right, Jeff. Look, I used to love football growing up, and I just don't understand it anymore. Ever since they went to the bubble screen and the skinny post, whatever that thing is, I grew up thinking it was a post pass. Now it's called a skinny post. I don't even understand. So I don't understand football. But your brother-in-law, Mark Keenahan, and I told him I don't think I can name 10 quarterbacks in the NFL right now. I used to be able to name all the kickers in the league when I was growing up. So how many quarterbacks do you think I could name? What percentage of the quarterbacks do you think I got right? We had a quiz at Mark's house.
Starters, right? Correct?
Yes.
Current starters, I think you could name at least 15. 16. You could name half of them for sure.
I got 20 of them correct.
Good. Okay.
I got 20 quarterbacks correct. Yes. That's terrible.
I think it's worth noting that on Sunday, despite my brother-in-law Mark's Bills losing, I do have Josh Allen on my fantasy team, and he scored 6 touchdowns. The only player in NFL history to throw 3 touchdowns and rush 3 touchdowns in the same game. First player ever to do that. And even though they lost, he gave me like 53 fantasy points. So I was really happy.
Which is all that matters, Jeff.
A lot of football here. Let's go into baseball, Dad. Right off the bat, Juan Soto, late Sunday night, December 8th, signs for an absurd amount of money, 15 years with the New York Mets. Your reactions?
Well, first, we got to go back to Thursday, Jeff. I was at the Safeway in Darnestown. You've been there many times. And I'm walking through the Safeway, and this wonderful old woman, I think she was close to 100 years old. She was walking so slowly. She came up to me, and I think she's so old that she's going to like ask me, where is the frozen food aisle? Instead, this wonderful woman looks me right in the eye and says, "Where's Soto going to sign?" That's what she said. She's like 100 years old. It was so adorable. And then we carried on this high-level conversation about Juan Soto and where he's going to sign. She goes, look, as long as he doesn't go to the Phillies, I'm okay with that, because her son is the biggest Phillies fan in the world and she's the biggest Nationals fan in the world. And they just couldn't have him going to a team like the Phillies because that would make her son too happy. She's laughing through this whole thing. So I was just so pleased to carry on that conversation with her. But here's the bottom line, Jeff, is the Mets got a generational hitter. He is one of the greatest hitters I've ever seen. When you look at his walk total and his home run total at age 26, it's virtually unprecedented. And he's going to be a great hitter for the next at least 10 years, even though he signed for 15 years. He's also got a chance someday to be the first Met ever to win the most valuable player, which still amazes me. They've been around since 1962 and they've never had an MVP. But Jeff, I go back to, and obviously this was all about money because it always is. The Yankees made a tremendously competitive offer for Juan Soto, but he needed another $5 million more on top of it so he could say, I got the most from the Mets. But the lesson here for me is when Steve Cohen took over as the owner of the Mets, I was talking to Bobby Valentine, who was one of our guests, one of the best guys you'll ever meet, and he knows Steve Cohen really well. And he goes on and on and on what a great guy Steve Cohen is, how he truly understands people and what it takes to get the best out of people. And then he kind of paused and he said, and he will not finish second to the Yankees on anything. And here Steve Cohen proved it. He needed to make a swift and bold move, and boy, did he ever. Is it an overpay? Of course it is, Jeff. $765 million, 15 years. It's absurd. But when you're the Mets, you haven't won the World Series since '86. You're trying to seize the fan base in New York. This is what you do. Whether it's good for baseball or not is irrelevant. At least it is to the Mets.
Amidst all of this excitement around Juan Soto, shortly before that announcement, we found out that the Hall of Fame will be joined by 2 new members. This is a really exciting announcement.
Yes, and Dick Allen is going into the Hall of Fame along with Dave Parker. Dick Allen should have been in years and years and years ago. To me, he was a first ballot Hall of Famer. Jeff, when you look at Dick Allen's career, the length of his career, 1964 for the next, 17 years, the only player that had a higher slugging percentage and a higher OPS during the depth of Dick Allen's career was Hank Aaron. Unbelievable. Wow. And for the prime years of Dick Allen, 64 through 74, he had the highest offensive WAR of any player, and it's not even close. And when you go back and look at that 1964 rookie season, Jeff, he had an 8.8 WAR until Mike Trout came along in 2012. No rookie had ever had a season quite like the one that Dick Allen had. And he was one of the strongest players that I've ever seen, and I'm old enough to have seen him in his prime, a great player. And his brother, Hank Allen, once told me, he said, my brother was a better high school basketball player than he was a high school baseball player. That's how good an athlete Dick Allen was. So I'm just thrilled for the Allen family that Dick Allen finally got in. And of course, I'm thrilled for Dave Parker, too. Dave Parker was one of the great players that I know I've ever seen. Go back and look at that 1978 season, one of the great we've ever seen. And for a 10-year period, he was certainly one of the best players in the game. And not just a big power hitter, but he could run. He was a great right fielder, had a tremendous throwing arm. So the bottom line is the Hall of Fame is a better place today with Dick Allen and Dave Parker in.
Isn't that the truth? And now I'm really excited. Before we get to our compilation episode today featuring so many amazing moments from 2024, each episode, each guest, you're going to get one moment. It was really hard to narrow it down for each guest. one moment from every single guest from the 2024 season in this episode coming up next. I'm excited to announce, though, our friends at Game Changer invited us to the ABCA, the American Baseball Coaches Association, big conference in January in Washington, D.C., and we're going to be out there, Dad, recording another offseason episode, and we're going to be joined by Brandon Geyer, which is going to be a great guest from the ABCA.
Right, and that will be on January the 4th, which, if I may, Jeff, that's your late Uncle Matt's birthday. And we can never forget that Uncle Matt, who was a great college baseball player, was also a really good high school baseball coach. But because he couldn't make enough money as a math teacher and a baseball coach, he had to quit and go into the IT business, which he flourished in. So this will have special meaning today that we're going to meet and greet with a bunch of coaches, because that's what Uncle Matt was. And Brandon Geyer is going to be great. Brandon Geyer is one of my favorite players that I ever covered. He was a football player playing baseball, University of Virginia, really smart guy, used to get hit by pitches all the time and never worried about a thing, played for Joe Madden. So Brandon Geyer will be a blast with us on my brother's birthday, January the 4th.
We can't wait to bring you along for that. And thank you again to Game Changer and Dick's Sporting Goods for having us along at the ABCA in January. Coming up next, a full compilation episode of Is This a Great Game or What? 2024, a highlight moment from each and every guest. So if you ever missed an episode, of course, you can always go back on our feed wherever you listen, or on YouTube if you watch there as well. You can see all of those moments coming out live for you. Dad, are you ready for it?
I'm ready. I can't wait. I don't know what my favorite one is. Is it Jeff Francoeur on Bobby Cox? Is it Johnny Bench facing Bob Gibson for the first time? Is it Ryan
Cal Ripken Jr. and his dad's toe?
Right. Or is it Ryan Zimmerman telling us about playing pickup basketball with Max Scherzer? Jeff, was the highlight of our first year on this podcast with the people that we got who we interviewed. Some of them made us laugh, some of them made us cry, but it was so much fun. I can't wait to hear this compilation.
It's coming up next.
Our guest on week one was our dear friend Eduardo Perez, my teammate on Baseball Tonight and on Games That We Do.
And he told us about being a kid in the clubhouse when his dad, Hall of Famer Tony Perez, was playing for the Cincinnati Reds.
When the game's over, and I was allowed in the clubhouse when they won. That was important. I loved the part that they won, because the first thing that I would do is go straight to the keg as a kid and prepare a keg? Oh yeah, and then I learned how to, I'm telling you, out of a tap as a, I want to say maybe as a 7 or 8 year old, I knew how to be able to get that beer without a lot of foam on it, just perfect, because that was my dad. I got that cold beer for him right there after the game. That's what I love to do after games. I never told you this on air, did I?
Love that.
Yeah, so it was, and then later on in his career when he started coaching and everything, it was Buddy Bell, Ron Oster the same way, and I was like, I got this, boys, I got it. And I would fill out the pitcher, and then I'd pour some of the beer. Good game, guys.
Rangers general manager Chris Young was our week 2 guest for Is This a Great Game or What? And we didn't talk to him about winning the World Series in 2023.
And we talked about the bizarre Major League record that he holds.
The tallest player ever to hit a triple in Major League Baseball history. I said, Dad, I was hoping for a little more background here, not what the Elias Sports Bureau is telling you here. So tell us about what that hit in your Major League career was like.
Oh, man. Well, another great story. And Tim, you do bring this up, and I knew you knew this. So this is a really funny moment in my career, and it's self-deprecating because I'm somewhat embarrassed. But it was 2006. I was playing for the Padres, and we were playing the Marlins, and I think we were winning 5 or 6-0 at the time. I think it was later in the game, maybe 6th or 7th inning, and I hit a sinking line drive to right field. The right fielder was already playing me in, knowing I probably couldn't hit it over his head, and so he was came in and he dove for the ball, and it got under his glove and went to the wall. And so, knowing that it's the 6th inning of the game, we're winning the game. I want to get through the 7th. I think I've got to stand up double, but as I coast into second base, I take a look at our third base coach, Glenn Hoffman, and he's waving me to third. So I think, okay, this must be a clear stand-up triple. Well, as I'm coming into third base, I see Glenn getting the slide sign, get out, and he's doing it with a look of panic in his face that I can read. There's going to be a close play here. And so I make this terrible late slide into third base, and I almost kill Miguel Cabrera, who was playing third base. And there is a picture of this slide, and Miguel Cabrera he's got this look on his face going like that, trying to get out of the way of my ugly slide. So fortunately, I was safe, and I do have a triple in the books, but it's not one to brag about.
Our next guest was Hall of Fame pitcher John Smoltz, who is a scratch golfer, even better. He has 11 holes in one in his career.
And he talked about one round he played with one of his teammates, Jeff Frank Gore, and how it ended. It's incredible.
John, Jeff Frank Gore is our dear friend, really good Major League Baseball player, and one of your best friends, and a really good golfer. But tell us about the time you went to 18 with him, and he had you dead to rights. Tell that story, please.
Yeah, so I played with a lot of my teammates. Whenever we'd go to spring training, it was more able for the position players to play. The regular season, it was more difficult. He wanted to beat me so bad. He's like the bull in the china shop, great athlete. He ran over everybody in high school, just so much superior over everybody else in his high school career that he thought he could beat me in golf. And up until this point, he hadn't, but he hits it 50 yards by me. He's got raw talent, but you could tell, there are moments like I mentioned, you get exposed in golf. There's that big number always waiting out there if you're not careful. Well, he had me by 5 shots going into the 18th hole at the Ritz-Carlton, where they play the father and son tournament. So, he had already worked out in the cart with Brian McCann what he was going to do in the clubhouse. He was going to print out the golf cards. He was going to post it in everyone's locker. He had everything written out and done. And, for the most part, in a day and age of win probability, he would have had about a 98, 99% win probability in this match. So he comes up to me in the 18th hole and he says, "Well, old man, I finally got you." I said, "Yeah, you played good today, kid, but we got one more hole to go. Let's just see what happens. But you played good. It's a par 5, dogleg kind of left around. Now, there's more room right than and there's water all left." Well, he was trying to hit it right for sure, but he pulled it left and it hit in the water, bounced on the ground, hit in the water. Well, I quickly told him, you're not going to gain much yardage by dropping. You might as well re-tee. Now, if he'd have dropped, he couldn't lose. But he wanted to hit off the tee, and he did. He hit it further left, this time left of the water into the hotel. And I said, the drill, drop it again, re-tee. He did it again. He hit it in the water again. And long story short, he makes a 15 or 14 on the hole, and I make a 4. I birdied the hole and beat him by 10, and I actually won by 5. So it completely flipped the script. The best part about the whole thing was me going over the card with him in the hole, knowing full well he made a 14, but I said he got a 15. So here we are arguing over one stroke on the hole that I know. I just want to hear him say it. I want to hear him go over. So 1 off the tee, 3 off the tee, 5 off the tee, 7 drop, 9 chunks. So it was a fun. I never said a word about it in the clubhouse. I think he thought I was going to really play this up. I never said a word, which probably puzzled him. But what I did do is every time we went to go play golf, I would either tell the pro or the cart girl, whatever the price is, just tell them 14. So I used the number 14 so much that he finally said, "Would you please stop?" And I said, "I will."
Our next guest was Jerry Hairston Jr., part of the 3-generation Major League Hairston family. Jerry is also a Dodgers broadcaster, and he spoke so eloquently about Jackie Robinson,
which was so important because it was Jackie Robinson Day when we had him on. Plus, he also talked about this Dodger team that ultimately won the World Series and how athletic Mookie Betts is.
Listen, guys, Mookie Betts is probably the best athlete on the planet. Now, obviously, Shohei Ohtani incredible athlete, throws 100 miles an hour on the mound, great pitcher, can run, epic power. Patrick Mahomes on the football field is second to none right now. There's a lot of great athletes. But Mookie Betts, seriously, he could be a professional bowler. He could run point guard for the Los Angeles Lakers right now. And he could be a slot receiver in the NFL. I am not kidding. He is that special of an athlete. He was drafted by the Boston Red Sox as an infielder. Okay, he was going to be a second baseman, but they had some guy named Dustin Pedroia who ended up being pretty good. So they asked Mookie, hey, why don't you go to the outfield? He makes himself not only an outfielder, he makes himself the best defensive right fielder that I've ever seen. I never got a chance to see Roberto Clemente. I heard Roberto Clemente, and just seeing footages, was second to none. But I think he's on par with Roberto Clemente defensively. Now you ask him, hey, can you go back and play second base? I got you. Now, I got a chance to play golf with Mookie Betts a few months back. No warm-up at all. I'm sitting there on the driving range, me and James Loney getting ready to tee off. Mookie's running late because he had a prior commitment, runs late. He meets us on the tee box. I hit my nice little 265, make sure I'm on the fairway. James, is in good shape. Mookie Betts hasn't swung a golf club, okay? Stripes at about 315, 330, right down the middle. I'm like, are you kidding me? Literally, I wanted to throw my golf club at him, okay? That's how talented he is. He could have done any sport and thrived. We're fortunate to have him in Dodger Blue, and he's lighting the world on fire right now with the bat.
Tito Francona was our guest in his retirement era, as they would say. Obviously, since we had him on, he became the Cincinnati Reds manager for the 2025 season moving forward. But you got a lot of memories with Tito.
Right. He worked at ESPN for 1 year, and I promise you, I laughed repeatedly for 1 year with Tito.
You had some interesting housing. Your first spring training with ESPN with my dad. Is that true?
It's so true. And normally stories get embellished with time. This one didn't really need to. I pull into Orlando, and it's my first time with ESPN in spring training, and I'm kind of nervous and have some anxiety. And I pull into this log cabin type. Tim, what was it called?
It was called Camp Wilderness.
Yeah, which is very apropos. And I get to my room, and I just know somebody's playing a joke on me. Like, I keep waiting for somebody to come out of the closet, like, hey, welcome to your new job. And I called Tim in his place, and I'm like, hey, man, let's go cook some s'mores. And I remember being hungry and calling the lobby, and the lobby was like, did you see that vending machine? I said, yeah. They go, that's our room service.
Jeff, they had bunk beds in our room. It's like we were in the Cub Scouts. He won 2 World Series with the Red Sox, and they put us in the middle of the woods in a log cabin. You want to go make some s'mores? True. Oh, it was so hilarious.
You know what, Tim? The one thing, there was one phone in my place, and it was on the opposite side of where the bunk beds were. So if somebody called, which I'm sure it was you, I couldn't get to the phone in time. It was like, but you know what? It kind of encapsulates our time there, because everything we did, we had fun. And I think that's the way it's supposed to be.
Right. Mike Shore, the mind behind great shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Parks and Rec, The Office. He was our guest, but he's not just a TV Hollywood guy. No, he loves baseball.
And he told us a Manny Ramirez story that not many people have ever heard.
I think it's Manny's rookie year. It's the year that O.J. Simpson goes on the run. Manny was on the Cleveland Indians at the time, and one of the players on the team was Chad O.J., the pitcher, OGEA. So he's watching he turns on the news, and he hears that the police are after OJ, that the police are chasing OJ Simpson, but all he hears is OJ, and he calls Chad OJ and says, hey, I don't know what you did, but I think the cops are looking for you. Are you okay? Do you need help? And Chad OJ was like, I think it's a different OJ, man,
Our Mother's Day episode, we had 2 guests, including former Major Leaguer Casey Candell,
whose mother, Helen, played in the Women's Professional Baseball League, which inspired the movie A League of Their Own. And Casey once told me, my mom had a better swing than I did.
The older brothers, they tell a story where she actually got kicked out of the mother son little league event.
No way.
They were afraid she was gonna hurt somebody. Yeah.
So that, I mean, is that the first time ever? Because I'm sure dads have been told you can't be a part of this, Mr. Griffey.
Right.
But I'm sure this is the first time ever.
Yeah, it was a great story. And so, she was like, they just kind of asked, oh, well, could you step back? Somebody could get hurt here.
That is so funny. Now, naturally, usually that father-son baseball bond, throwing, catch in the backyard, getting ready for a big game, or the pep talks on the way to the game. Did you have those with your mom? Was she teaching you how to be a ball player?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the mental side. I mean, she was really good with that. I mean, she would play catch. I thought everybody's mom was doing it, hit ground balls, play catch. I was like, oh yeah, that's what moms do, I guess. And not till I got older did I realize, oh, that was very unique. And she was a player. But she would talk to me as I was growing up, and just about how to handle yourself and how to play the game, and that you can never have a bad day of hustling. So you know what, you don't have to take any, it doesn't take any talent to do that. So those were the kind of things she instilled in me growing up.
Our other guest for our Mother's Day episode was Major League infielder Christian Arroyo, whose mom, didn't matter if she was pregnant, didn't matter if she had kids running around, she was making him into the Major League player that he became.
The very early stages of my baseball playing days was all started by my mom.
That is so amazing, because my mom helped me with poster board projects, and your mom was throwing BP? Is it hitting you grounders?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it gets better, too. I mean, I've told this story before, but I think in the postseason in 21, I talked about this. But, yeah, she was about 7 or 8 months pregnant when she was doing that. So,
what?
It's kind of hard to understand exactly what that means. My wife and I we just introduced our first child into the world this last off season. So getting to see my wife go through that at the 7 to 8 month, period of being pregnant, I cannot imagine hitting ground balls and throwing BP.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in every sense of the word, like, my mom is legitimately my superhero. So, I can't thank her enough. It's cliche to say, but there really are no words to express my gratitude for what she did for me at such a young age and continues to do for me throughout my life.
I love how many guests we got on the show that worked with you, Dad, at ESPN, whether it was calling games or being in the studio of Baseball Tonight. And former manager Buck Showalter was one of our guests.
Right, and one of the great storytellers ever. Wait till you hear this one. On Baseball Tonight, when you had to demonstrate a takeout slide of Harold Reynolds. Now, tell us the story with all the details. Jeff, he was not dressed in sweatsuit and sneakers. Tell us the story.
Well, we kept talking about slides in the second base and what's legal, what's not. And Harold and I were talking. I told the camera guys, I said, listen, we're going to do a demo of this. Harold wanted to do a demo. And he didn't realize. I told the camera guys off the side, listen, you got one take at this. Don't miss it. I'm going to take him out. And they went, what? I said, I'm going to get him. So he put an old burlap sack down there, and I didn't realize there was these steel rivet screws on the floor of the set. So Harold's getting a feed, probably from Tim, and I'm coming in from first base, and I got a full suit on, tie, the whole 9 yards. And I slide. It's on tape somewhere, Tim, because they turned it into the Emmy show thing. And I got to tell you, Jeff, I smoked him. He was asshole up in the air, tea kettles, whatever you call it. And Tim, he had his feet up in the air, and I ripped my pants from above my kneecap to my cheek of my left rear. But we got it on tape. And I don't know if he's forgiven me yet. Has he, Tim? I don't know if Harold ever forgave me.
No, Harold is still surprised that he got taken out by a guy in a three-piece suit. But who was surprised? It was Buck. If he's going to do it, he's going to do it properly.
Right.
And the next guest is my dear friend, Steve Rushin, who is the best writer for me in America. He's the smartest and the funniest person that I've ever met.
And we got to let you know, before we go into our highlight from this interview, he's married to Rebecca Lobo, one of the best WNBA players of all time, and they're differing reactions in meeting Carlton Fisk.
Her experience of baseball is, so she grew up a Red Sox fan. She got Carlton Fisk's autograph on a baseball and told me, Carlton Fisk was such a nice guy. And then she met Roger Clemens and he was such a nice guy, and said, let me tell you, I had very different experiences covering these guys. The very first story I did on the baseball beat for Sports Illustrated, they sent me out this week. I went to cover the Brewers. I interviewed, I think, everybody on the roster. And then they said, no, we don't want to do the Brewers this week. We want to do the White Sox, go down to Chicago. It was the last year of old Comiskey. And I was standing on the field talking to our photographer, Ron Madra. And Carlton Fisk came over to Ron and said, hey, those pictures you took of me in spring training, could I get a copy? Blah, blah. So I didn't come up to his conversation. He came up to our conversation. And so I introduced myself. I'm Mr. Fisk. I'm Steve Rushin from Sports Illustrated. I'm 22 years old and I'd love to interview you today. And he just turned and walked away without a word and just started. And I said, oh, did he not hear me? And so I followed him. And he's going down into the dugout and down the clubhouse tunnel. And he said, I got meetings all day today. And I said, well, I'll be here for the next 3 days. And he said, I've got meetings for the next 3 days. So that's when I knew that I was going to be a very highly strung, stressed out guy for the next 3 years.
On Memorial Day, our next guest was Lindsay Berra, the granddaughter of Yogi Berra, one of the greatest players of all time.
And she told us that Yogi didn't love talking about his service, despite being a military hero himself, and how this actually got him in a little bit of trouble with one of baseball's military heroes.
Grandpa, there was a little bit when Grandpa was first in the big leagues when Bob Feller wouldn't talk to him, and he didn't understand what the problem was because Grandpa, he talked to everybody, and he asked somebody, why doesn't Bob Feller like me, or why doesn't he talk to me? And he goes, oh, he doesn't have respect for people who didn't serve their country. And Grandpa was like, yo, hello, I was there. And then Bob Feller eventually apologized to him, and then they became great friends. So a lot of, even his, his counterparts in Major League Baseball didn't know he was in the service. Grandpa was never one to toot his own horn, and, or to talk about himself at all, be it, World War II or baseball or whatever. You had to really ask him pointed questions to get him to go into detail about anything. So I guess, that's what happened with Bob Feller too.
On Lou Gehrig Day, we had Sarah Langs on the show, who is such a great baseball mind, credible statistician, great storyteller, who is also battling ALS. We lost my Uncle Matt, my dad's brother, in the fall to ALS. We have a Lang Star ALS right here above our set for Is This a Great Game or What?
Right, and we asked Sarah for her favorite stat, her favorite story ever. Get a load of this.
So my absolute favorite of all time was in May, I want to say, of 2019. There was a game the Giants were playing in Cincinnati, and Pablo Sandoval had a home run, and he had a stolen base. And then Pablo pitching was always a huge thing among the Giants fan base. And he came in to pitch, and he pitches the eighth inning, and he was scoreless. I mean, he's a position player pitching. It's obviously very silly, but he did it, and he did it well. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, how many guys hit a home run, has stolen base? By the way, Pablo having a stolen base was obviously quite a moment as well.
Very impressive.
And, then, and also had a scoreless pitching appearance. So I called the Elias Sports Bureau. I say, hey, can we look at this? The only other guy to have done that at that time was Chrissy Mathewson, also for the Giants, also against the Reds. And of course, he threw a shutout, not one scoreless inning. But that was for a long time my absolute go-to. And then last year, Shohei Ohtani, when he had his first career shutout, his first career complete game, did the same thing. So now we have three guys who've done that. and Otani, Pablo Sandoval, and Christy Mathewson. I mean, whenever you Pablo Sandoval and Christy Mathewson on the same list, you know it's amazing. And that is really why baseball is the best. That is what you get.
On Father's Day, we had my dear friend Carl Ravitch, the best play-by-play guy that I've ever worked with, and his son Sam.
And we talked about a prank that the folks on Baseball Tonight and Sunday Night Baseball pulled on you during a broadcast. I recall one of my favorites, and I hope I don't steal your favorite story, which is when you guys were at Fenway Park, and my dad was wearing a winter coat in the booth, mind you, and gloves. But he had lost one of his gloves, and he was complaining, I can't find my glove, can't find my glove. And at every bump shot, you know, when you come back from a commercial or you're about to go to a commercial, you had the whole camera crew in on it, putting his glove in different, on the monster, it's on a seed, and Dad never noticed until you played the playback. I mean, just genius. I had to, because I know you had to have been behind that prank, right?
I was certainly a part of it. I mean, we were always trying to conspire ways, and unfortunately, you know, your dad, who I know is in the room and can hear this, he is one of the perfect targets for things like because of the way he behaves. And look, you know, there's the great story about getting to a Yankee game when it's snowing 7 hours early, sitting in a parking garage that it wasn't even open. Somehow he got the car in there. The game gets canceled. He's got to go home. But he created so many of those opportunities. You know, we started this before we came on to do the podcast. The heavy sigh, the knee slap. There are so many mannerisms that everybody, I mean, Jeff and Sam, you walk into a Baseball Tonight green room, and as soon as he walks in, and then everybody's doing the Tim Kurkjian act. So, yeah, the glove thing was so great because Eduardo was in on it. Everybody was in on it. And there was this glove, you know, it's like the TV over Sam's, you know, left shoulder there. Everybody can see it, except where the hell the glove is. There goes the glove. There it is. It's in the popcorn. It's everywhere. It's right on that kid. It was wonderful.
Our next guest was my dear friend Doug Glanville, who talked eloquently about the Rickwood game that was played in Birmingham, Alabama. And he also told us about the game that he played in.
He was not too happy. It was a little unfair.
But, you know, I hit, and in the game, I faced Jose Contreras and Tyson Ross. And we're always, like, right before the game, we were a little nervous because, you know, I was talking to Tony Wynn Jr., and we were like, how hard are you going to go? How hard are you going to go? We were trying to gauge, like, how much we put on the accelerator, knowing that at 100, we're going to blow out. So Tony and I are talking, and, you know, so at some point, you know, we try to figure out, like, a little bit of a strategy, like, all right, we're going to go hard. So Jose Contreras is pitching, and I got a 1-0 count. And I hit a good, you know, nice line drive, a little air under it in right center. Now, of course, the guy who retired like last year is playing center, so that's not really fair. I needed Jim Rice out there. All right, Jim Rice out there, that's a triple. But no, we have Dexter Fowler out there, of course, running it down. Like, you know, it's like, dude, like you played last week. I mean, come on, you got to let that drop. So he doesn't let it drop. I get, you know, so I'm out. But I did, you know, my walk rate, which was like negative 0.5 when I played, I actually walked in this game and scored. So I ended up scoring the second run, and then Ryan Howard hit a 3-run homer. So I felt like I did something. But it was great that my kids and my wife got to see me one last time, and my kids finally old enough to appreciate it. So it was really incredible. And we had, most importantly, a lot of fun.
Our next guest was my friend Aaron Boone. You know him as the manager of the New York Yankees.
But as we learned, he is the master of impressions.
For the Phillies, third baseman Mike Schmidt, catcher Paul Boone, right fielder Bake McBride.
Booty, what are you doing? You're sending this to me in the middle of the night. It's a cartoon emoji, and it's you doing a perfect impersonation.
So that's Dan Baker, of course, the great PA announcer for the Phillies. And so one of the things, Brad Osmus now is my bench coach, and he sees these quirks of mine every single day like it's a tick. Like I say "full of the Phillies" in Dan Baker's voice 100 times a day. So my coaching staff, all the people, just like, geez, roll the dice. That's 30. So I'm doing this stupid stuff all the day, or we got Mike Harkey on our staff, so I'll be Hart for 3. Or Robert, so like,
yeah.
I mean, yeah. So, and I've turned it into. So Brad Osmus, so his name backwards is Sumswa. So I've turned it into, when I see him, I say, Sumswa for 30.
Dave Zinkoff, give us at least a couple guys, please, from the starting lineup for the Sixers.
Got it. West Texas Davidson, Mo Sheep. The other guy. Down West Louisiana, 22, Andrew Stoney. Pittsburgh, Virginia, Pittsburgh High School, Moses Malone. Lower. West Virginia, A. Mark Ivorone. Oh boy. Captain, University of Massachusetts, Six Doctor, do you? Coach Billy Cunningham, Sis back Lucas.
Hank Azaria was our next guest. I mean, he's a voice on pretty much every Simpsons character. He's Brockmire, and he joined us for the show.
Right, and I made an appearance on Brockmire, and he walked us through everything that we needed to do, and I still screwed it up.
Tell us about how he couldn't remember his one line, Hank.
Well,
His one line.
that was just, one moment of one day. I mean, he did great, but, we threw him a line. I'll tell you, it's Jim Brockmire. He was supposed to say, I love Yentl. He was talking about Barbara Streisand.
Right.
And instead, he proudly announced, I love lentil. And we said, well, now, Tim, we didn't ask you what your favorite kind of soup is. That would have been good had we teed you up that way. But it was great.
Our next guest was ESPN's Scott Van Pelt, who is also the master of the long ew in the Baltimore accent.
So we ambushed Dad at the end of the interview for the all-ew team.
At catcher, we have Biff Pickaruba. Pickaruba. First base, Walt Rizzo. Second baseman, Craig Bezier. Third baseman, Leo Davis. At short, Lou Boudreaux. And our outfielders, Minnie Menesto, Joe DiMaggio, Tony Carrasco. Our starting pitcher, Bartolo Colon. We have Hippolito Pichardo. Pitching coach, Leo Mazzoni. Our manager is Leo DeRocher. And pink hitting in case of emergency, I added this with Jeff. I hope you don't mind. Joe Charbonneau.
Thank you,
He's in the
Scott.
Hall of Fame, everybody. And this is what he's known for. This stupidity.
I'm crying and I'm not apologizing. Thank you so much for joining us, Scott.
Our next two guests is when we get into our murderer's row of Is This a Great Game or What? Cal Ripken Jr. joined the show.
Right, and Cal Ripken Jr. got his toughness from his father, Cal Sr., who is the single toughest person that I've ever met to wear a Major League uniform. And Cal Jr. describes his father. Tell us the story about your dad, who played soccer in his mid-50s, and he came home that day with his young son, Junior, and he's got a giant blood blister under his right big toe.
We covered the ground with a broken nose early and me putting it back in place, and I'm thinking, where did I get that from?
Right.
I get that from Dad. Dad used to always say, when you got a little injury, you'd say, rub a little tobacco juice on it, it'll be all right tomorrow. Or it'll be all right before you're married twice. It was always like a downplaying. Now, if he had something that was more serious, he'd be a little more serious about it. But when we were kids, and he took off his sock, and then, there was a big blood blister under his nail on his big toe. And so he went out in the garage and got a drill and put a drill bit in it and drilled straight down through the nail and relieved the pressure, and then it started squirting out the top. But in the process of doing that, you can't control it too well, so then the drill went down a little further than it needed to, and so he was cussing at it or whatever else at that. And my mom looked at him, and he said, "That's what the doctor would have done anyway." And he said, "Yeah, but the doctor would have done it a little bit more precise than that." He said, "It'll be all right."
In our Cooperstown episode, we brought in the greatest catcher of all time, Johnny Bench, for our Hall of Fame edition.
And it was really special for him to talk about his dad on a show hosted by a father and a son.
But my dad and I would watch the game of the week every Saturday with Gene Kirby, Pee Wee Reese, and Dizzy Dean. But we would go down to Helm's Grocery. We'd get a half-gallon Neapolitan ice cream. We'd fill our bowls up, and we'd sit there and eat it while we watched the game. Now, Dad, he had actually batted against Satchel Paige in little sandlot stuff after he did, and I watched him play, and he could do lots of stuff. But he'd sit there and, like every fan, how in the hell could he watch that? How could he miss that pitch? Hell, I could hit that guy. I could hit him. How can Ralph Terry throw a curve? Hell, I could hit that guy. So it was embedded in me, and so I get called up by the Reds to St. Louis, up to Cincinnati, and we go to St. Louis. And I called Mom and Dad, and I said, "I can get you tickets. I'll get you a room. Come on up to St. Louis and watch." So he said, "Okay." So they come. So at first night, I'm going to really impress the hell out of them. But we faced a pitcher by the name of Bob Gibson that first time. And I don't know if his ERA was 1.12 that year or what, but all of a sudden I'm up there and I strike out. And I go up the second time and I strike out. And I go up the third time and I strike out. And I'm coming back and I'm walking by the batter on deck circle. And just before I get to the dugout, our manager was Dave Bristol. Dave was kind of like Sergeant Carter on Gomer Pyle, USMC. You didn't think of anything but baseball. There was nothing but baseball. And I start to smile as I get to the on deck circle. And by the time I reach the dugout, I'm grinning. And he's down here. It took 3 or 4 steps in, so he had to walk down the rail. He looked up at me and said, "What in the hell is so funny?" I said, "I was just thinking, I don't think Dad can hit this guy."
Our next guest was Eddie Alvarez, who won an Olympic medal in speed skating and in baseball. The only person that's ever played Major League Baseball and won an Olympic gold medal in anything else was Jim Thorpe.
And he talked a little bit about one of his teammates on that Olympic baseball team. Do you have any great Todd Frazier stories of you guys playing on that 2020?
I have way too many, but I definitely have a couple that I would love to share. The Todd Father, as I like to call him, or pretty much everybody loves to call him. He's a character. He's a one-man show. That guy needs his own show is what he needs. So we're waiting to go to a practice. So we're waiting in our our bus stop or section. There was like a bunch of, we had to walk to this bus station almost, and it was just 1,000 stops. That's what it felt like. And we were like one of the last ones, so we had to walk one of the furthest. And we get to the bus stop and we're waiting. We're bored. We're talking smack. You know how we baseball players can get. And we're just sitting there, and I put my phone up to do a selfie for nothing, and I put the phone. Todd's sitting behind me, and I zoom in on Todd. And next thing I know, he starts singing, and he has a voice of an angel. I don't know.
He is a great singer. I have. It's great.
It's incredible. Yes. Everyone's jaw was on the floor. So I'm gonna blow him up right now. He started singing this Aladdin song. All right, I have the video. You guys ready?
Let's
for
see
this?
it.
Oh my god.
Oh, it's so great.
Surrounding the Olympics of 2024, we had Olympic manager Mike Scioscia, who won a silver medal with the American team, also obviously longtime Angels manager.
Right, and he had some unique ways of bringing his team together during spring training.
Sent Jared Washburn and a couple guys out to the Ostrich Festival out in Arizona. And so I expected him just to take some pictures, take some interviews. They had a little camera with him. So Wash comes in the next day, and I said, "You ready to give your report?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm ready." And he said, "Well, we really do a lot of things, but I think instead of giving you a picture, we wanted to show you something else." And in comes this ostrich. I mean, he was every bit of 10 feet. I mean, you can think it's an exaggeration. This ostrich's head would have hit a basketball hoop. And so this ostrich comes in, and all the guys are like, "Oh yeah." Well, Ramon Ortiz didn't quite understand it. You know, they were talking about an ostrich, and he didn't know what it was. And he literally jumped on top of his locker, and he's saying in Spanish, "Get that big chicken out of here." He's saying it in Spanish. And it was hilarious. I mean, we laughed about that. We still laugh about it today. But we had the trainer came in, told us about an ostrich, and we tried to get Ramon to go over and just pet it. And he had nothing to do with it. He was not going to go near that bird.
Our next guest, former Major League outfielder Jeff Francoeur, who told us about the first time he played golf with Tiger Woods.
And we aren't able to play favorites, but this might be our favorite clip of the recap of 2024.
What was it like playing with arguably the greatest player of all time?
I'll tell you, I've never actually told this story on anything, and I think this will be the greatest story I tell was, I got a chance to play with him a couple times. I was 22 years old, and it was incredible. I grew up my whole life watching this guy, and I'll never forget pulling into Isleworth the first time and seeing him on the range, and it was probably the most surreal moment of my life. I've been lucky enough. I've met President Bush, President Obama. I was not nearly as starstruck as I was when I met Tiger Woods for the first time. But what the coolest Bobby Cox story is, guys, is Bobby during spring training loved us to play golf, loved this. We were playing the Yankees at 1 o'clock on a day game, and I was 22 years old. I had been playing for 3 months as a starter. I was not going to go up to Bobby and be like, "Hey, I need the day off," right? But he comes out to stretch and goes, "Smoltzy said you had a chance to play with Tiger today. There was a 150 tee time." And I'm like, "Bobby, I'm fine. I'm playing today." He goes, "No, I'll make you a deal." He said, "After your first at bat today, run through first base and kind of rub your ankle a little bit like you hurt your ankle." And he's like, "In 2 days, we're going to Bradenton." And Tim, you have to have 3 starters make a road trip.
Sure.
And he's like, "I hate Bradenton's infield. I don't want to get any of the guys hurt. So if you go to Bradenton, I'll let you go play with Tiger today." So sure enough, man, we're playing the Yankees, 13,000 people in Orlando. I ground out the first at bat. I run through first and I start, rubbing my ankle. And, Bobby, he waddles out there with his cleats. And he checks on me. I run inside. I literally throw my golf clothes on. I didn't shower. I get to the golf course, and they're on the first fairway. So I hit my tee shot. We end up playing 27 holes. And about 4:30, my wife sends me a little thing that there was an update that said Francoeur day-to-day with a high ankle sprain. And I'm out there playing Isleworth with Tiger. So the best part is the next day, I didn't even have to do anything. I came in, iced my ankle and all that, and Bobby let me go that day.
And for our Little League episode, we had Todd Frazier, one of the all-time heroes of Little League baseball, and he's still the biggest 12-year-old I've ever seen.
We were live at Williamsport with our friends at Game Changer, and he gave us his impression, not so much his actual referee ability, and stood up from the table. It's one of our favorites.
So my buddy Jim, it's me and him doing it. Older guy, he trips. Now, the biggest thing about, I'm down below on the baseline. It's a fast break. I got to book it, okay? So I go, "Jim, I got this." Yeah. Jim's on the ground. I said, "Jim, don't worry. I'm booking it here." Bang, bang, play. It was a charge. I say charge. It was player control or a block. I'm high-stepping it. Block, block, block. There! I had to scream it because I didn't know if Jim was there or not. I said, "There!" 2-1. See the turn? Body. And now listen, the subs tried coming in. I said, no, not yet. We got 2 here. Backhand 2.
Backhand 2? This isn't right.
No. 2 shots. Subs, hold your time. And Jim, I had the referee the rest of that game by myself. He rolled his ankle.
Because he was hurt.
Oh.
Our next guest is Dan Shaughnessy, who I believe is the best daily sports columnist in America and a mentor of mine in this business.
And we talked to him. He told us some great stories about Ted Williams.
When my daughter was diagnosed in 1993 with leukemia, she was 8 years old, and she's in the hospital one day, and I didn't know Ted. I had, right here in this Otasaga one time, I sat at his table. They'd have tables the day after the induction. You could sit at DiMaggio's table, Feller's table, and I took the Ted table, and no one dared say a word. He sat down at that table, and everybody looked, and no one wanted to. And he said, "Scared to death, aren't you?" And we were, and it was just so. That's how you were around him. But when my daughter was sick, the phone rang in the hospital, and she was in the early days of treatment. It was a 2-year protocol for treatment. And knock on wood, things came out great. She has 3 little boys now. But in those moments, everybody's scared to death, and it was just a bomb of news. And she said, "Daddy, there's a loud man on the phone telling me I'm going to be okay." And she didn't know who he was. He identified himself, and she passed the receiver over to me and said, "Oh, your little girl, you tell her. I knew Dr. Farber, and damn it, we always said he could cure these kids, and he's going to find a way, and damn it, he'll do it. And you tell her I'll come up and see her, and I hope she becomes a ball player, and I heard she likes to hit." And after that, I just put a call through, and I could always get him, because he'd say, "How's Kate? Can she hit? How's it going?" And she did. She played high school softball. She walked on at BU, played a little bit. And she's been a coach ever since. But she had this relationship. And the day he died, she was working at the Twins souvenir shop near Cross Street in Fenway. And she had a Ted authentic jersey, and she wore it, not knowing that Ted was going to die that day. And then she was wearing it in the shop when she learned that he died.
Our next guest is Rays closer Pete Fairbanks, who throws 100 miles an hour.
And he reads at 100 miles per hour. He's a smart guy.
My mother was reading me. We went through the first Harry Potter book, right? We read Sorcerer's Stone together. It was like my nighttime. She would read it aloud. It took however long. We started the second one. We got to like the second chapter, and I'm like, "Mom, you're not reading fast enough for me anymore. So I'm going to take this by myself."
How old were you?
Probably like first or second grade, I think, maybe second grade, somewhere along those lines.
You were reading Harry Potter at that young of an age. That's incredible.
Our next guest is Hall of Fame pitcher Jim Palmer, who famously never gave up a grand slam in his major league career in close to 4,000 innings.
But he did give up a grand slam in his minor league career to a name I guarantee you're going to recognize.
The day before, we played a day game, and Johnny hit a jam shot to right field, and I had just gotten there because I had the sore arm, and I said, "Who's that? Who's that guy?" They get, "Oh, he's a punch and Judy hitter." He had like 15 home runs in 21 games for the Buffalo Bison. So they moved the game. They moved the game from War Memorial Stadium to Niagara Falls in a college football game. Now I had a bad arm. I was warming up on a berm out in right field. They didn't have a warm-up mound. And I the first time up, I threw a high fastball, which is probably about 84 miles per hour, and Johnny swung at it, and I struck him out, not on purpose. My arm was killing me. And I had a 6-0 lead. I was pitching against, I think, a left-hander that eventually would pitch with the Red Sox, Dick Stigman. I walked the bases loaded with a 6-run lead, and Tim, you were around, Earl Weaver. You think he was So he runs out to the mound and says, "Hey, just throw the ball." I can't tell you
right.
The language. Just throw the ball down to the
right.
I did. And Johnny hit it about 450 feet towards Niagara Falls, and Earl ran right out and took me out of the game, and we went on to win.
So in 2024, I really only booked like 2 guests for our show. Jeff Francoeur, who we heard from earlier, and legendary broadcaster Dan Patrick.
Right, and Dan is roughly the same age as me. We have similar interests. We grew up at the same time, and some of the names that he dropped just made me laugh out loud.
I grew up in a baseball household, got to see the Reds. First game I saw was Pete Rose. My first autograph I got was Pete Rose. First game, spring training in Scottsdale, I got to see the San Francisco Giants. I got to see Willie Mays. I was fascinated that there was a baseball player named Jesus out there. And my dad goes, "That's Jesus." I said, I remember going to church and I was like 8 and I go, "Are we going to go see Jesus today?" And he goes, "No, he's Jesus." I said,
Our next guest was one of our personal favorites, now with the MLB Network, Adnan Virk.
Right, and I did the Le Batard show for years, of course. My favorite segment of the whole show was the looks like game, and the greatest looks like game ever was Adnan Virk.
So, of course, we always have fun with our buddy Dan Le Batard, and nobody laughed harder than Tim when they finally got me the looks like game and said that I looked like... I think it was something along the lines, I look like a James Bond is rescued by an undercover CIA agent. I'm like the guy who extends his hand and says, "Welcome to Tangier." And
it's the best one by far. I have it verbatim here, Adnan.
Yeah,
Are you ready?
go ahead.
Yes.
Adnan Virk looks like the undercover CIA agent who saves James Bond by killing a crime boss's henchman, then smiles wide, extends his hand, and says to 007, "Welcome to Tangier, Mr. Bond."
so, of course, that audience is so popular and so rabid that I said I was so flattered by it. I told Dan and Amin Al-Hassan, I said, if I'll do it on a home run call. They go, okay. And so, I couldn't just pick, the White Sox and the Twins in a sleepy August.
Right.
I said, no, it's me and Tim and Eddie Perez, and it's 4th of July, and it's Aaron Judge.
And it's in Baltimore, right.
Right, in Baltimore. And on the home run call, very similar to No Doubter, I said, hit deep, welcome to Tangier. And right away, Tim laughs, and Eddie's doing the call, and then they disputed it on the show. They go, is Tim laughing at how hard Aaron Judge hit the ball, or is he laughing at Adnan dropping a "Welcome to Tangier"?
Right. Go back and listen to the tape. I was laughing because I laughed way before he made the call because Aaron Judge hit a laser shot into the center field seats. I went like this, like how hard is that ball hit? And then when Adnan delivered the line, then I laughed even louder because it's the stupidest home run call in history and yet the greatest one.
To kick off our October baseball edition of Is This a Great Game or What? We had the greatest national ever World Series champion, Ryan Zimmerman.
Right, and he talked about playing basketball with Max Scherzer. You can only imagine how that went.
And when you play with Max, there's always Max rules. So
explain.
You're playing. So like we would go work out and then use that as our conditioning. So our the head strength guy used to live in the area, and he used to throw at Georgetown. So either the pitching coach or someone for Georgetown would let him into the facility to do that. So we would have sort of that kind of group. And then if the Georgetown basketball team was in there, maybe some of their student, coaches and stuff would join sometimes. Ewing was watching us play one time because it was before their practice. But so Max I think we would play to 15 or, gosh, I forget it was 15 or 16. I think it was 16 because when you got to 8, you had to stop and you had to hit free throws because he said, I want people to shoot free throws when they're exhausted so that they could mentally see what it's like to try and perform in the clutch. And then like the only way to win the game was to hit your free throws at the end of the game. And then obviously whoever lost had to do suicides or something like that. It's just such it literally kind of just wraps Max up in a nutshell in a game of pickup off-season basketball that he then has 7 weird rules that somehow ultimately probably help him win the game. He always had special rules for him, and we used to call him Max Madoff because he would win everything he did.
Our next guest was Jason Benetti, one of the great broadcasters in sports today. He is currently the TV voice of the Detroit Tigers.
And we obviously talked baseball with him, but we also talked Anchorman, one of my favorite movies of all time, and something he got you to do during COVID.
It was so bad.
Sketch that you guys put together was you instructed my dad to play one of the greatest comedy characters of all time, Brick Tamblyn. I love Lamp.
I thought it was going to rupture our friendship for good, and I still think it may.
And now we are in love. Did I say that out loud?
I love desk.
Brick, are you just looking at things in the office and saying you love them?
I love lamp.
Do you really love the lamp? Or are you just saying it because you saw it?
I love lamp.
Jason, how many times did I tell you I'm not doing this? This will be the stupidest thing ever. And you coerced me. You talked me into that. How did you do that?
I think Jeff had a part in it because Jeff loves the movie. And so Jeff was like, well, Dad, good for your Q rating, right? That's kind of how it went, Jeff.
I said, Dad, as your son, I don't know if I could forgive you if you don't do this. It's my favorite movie of all time.
I even combed my hair like Brick Tamblyn, and I found a suit in my house, a brown suit. It was hideous. I am practicing my lines, and I'm thinking, I love Lamp. What does that? I don't even know what that means. It was so bad.
It's brilliant script writing, and it's comedic genius, and you nailed all the marks.
Our next guest was former major leaguer Bobby Valentine. I covered his first game as a major league manager in 1985. Decorated major league manager, not just in the United States, but in Japan.
And decorated restaurateur. He owned restaurants and claims he invented something that everybody eats in 2024, but he invented it years ago.
I started a restaurant business. I did it for 38 years, by the way, for whatever it's worth. I had 7 of them open for 25 years consecutively. And at one time, I was the only celebrity athlete to have more than 3 restaurants open at the same time for more than 20 years. I said, I'll never cook. I'm going to own a restaurant, but I'm never going to cook. That's for other people. They're going to cook. And sure, one Friday lunch, my guy doesn't show up in the kitchen, and we have a line out the door, and I say, oh, I better go and flip some hamburgers. While I was in there, the guy who gave me the loan to open the restaurant, the banker from across the street, came in, and he always ate club sandwiches. We didn't have club sandwiches on the menu, but for him, we'd make a club sandwich. He was the guy who gave me the $30,000 to open the place. You got it, Mr. Burke. Okay, well, my number one waitress, Debbie, comes in and says, oh, God, Mr. Burke's out there. I said, what's the problem? She says, the toaster's broke. We can't make the club sandwich. And I said, holy cow. And next to me, the guy was putting the tortillas into the deep fryer to make tortilla chips, cutting up the 10-inch tortilla shell. And I said, don't worry, we'll send them out a club sandwich in a second. So I took a 10-inch tortilla shell. I put all the ingredients of a club sandwich in it. I rolled it up. I put a couple of American cheese slices on the top. I put it underneath the salamander to melt and keep the tortilla from opening up. I cut it in half. I gave it to Debbie with some French fries on it and said, give it to Mr. Burke and tell him it's a club sandwich Mexican style. And 2 weeks later, we had it on the menu as a club Mex.
Our next guest is my teammate, Buster Olney at ESPN, one of the best baseball writers of all time. And he grew up on a dairy farm in Vermont.
And he was so bored, he found a way to cross cows and baseball. Here's Buster.
I was so desperate on this farm that the closest house is 1.5 miles from our farm. When I was a kid, I made up a baseball dice game, and I would never use the names of major league players because it felt like sacrilege to me to do that. Like I was not going to put Fred Lynn and Jim Rice and those guys in my game, Steve Garvey. So I used all of our cows. Okay. It was my first, I realized looking back on it, it was my first experience in scouting because I could look at Rebecca, who was our first cow, and say, she's got the body of a third baseman. There's no doubt about it. A little bit of power, a lot of strength there. And then we had some younger cows that had speed. They were base stealers. I'd put them in the outfield in my dice game. That's how desperate I was.
Buster, I always knew you were a weird guy, but you are even weirder than I thought after hearing that. Rebecca is the third baseman? Oh,
Yes.
my God.
Oh, no
Clearly,
question.
she's got the body of one.
Right, that's exactly right.
Our next guest is former Major League catcher and former Major League manager David Ross, who was my teammate for several years at ESPN.
And he actually described, we all know his final home run in the World Series in 2016. He talked about his first home run.
I got my first hit in that game off Andy Orpace's sidearm lefty, a double in the gap. And then I got another at bat later in that game. And lo and behold, they bring in Mark Grace to pitch. Okay. So, I'm the rookie. I'm like, I need all the hits I can get. I see him. He steps on the mound. The crowd's going crazy. And you guys know Mark. He is like just a character. And so he gets up there and does the fetter. He comes set and does the fetter on there. The place is rough. It's going crazy. And I forget, it was Tyler Houston maybe was the first at bat. He popped up, and I remember him just laying it in there. It was like 80 miles an hour, and I'm like, that's right in my wheelhouse. That's my bat speed. Like I may not be able to hit 92, but I can catch up to 80. So he laid that thing right in there, and I'm like, well, if he lays that in there to me, I'm swinging. So sure enough, I get in there. I think Tyler popped up. I get in there, and I'm ready. And he lays that first pitch in there, and I almost hit it in that Friday's front row restaurant in left field. I absolutely murdered that ball. And I'm running around first. He's screaming at me the whole way. You got to be kidding me! You're stealing my thunder! Come on, kid! He don't even know who I am. And meanwhile, I'm like, this is Mark Grace on the mound. So I'm sprinting around the base as fast as I can. It was a really real highlight. But my favorite part of the whole story is the next day we did a radio show together. And I'm a rookie. I hadn't done any radio shows. He got on there, and I think I probably said 5 words in the whole time. He had us laughing. He had the radio host laughing. He was telling the story. I don't even know who this kid is, and he's giving souvenirs to the restaurant up in left field. Still to this day, every time he was doing games for the Diamondbacks and the Cubs, he always used to say, no matter where I was a career 220 hitter, and he's saying, that's the best hitter on their team, David Ross. That's the guy you got to look out for.
And that wraps it. David Ross, our final guest of the 2024 season. Many more to come in 2025, and I couldn't imagine a better day to release this episode than today. Happy birthday, Dad.
Right. Well, thank you, Jeff. This is the best birthday present I've ever gotten, is getting to do an entire year of podcast with you. And the highlight of the podcast were all of the interviews that we did. I hope you enjoyed what we put together for you today.
Thank you for listening, and as always, thank you for being a part of our family.